Welcome to In Search of the New Compassionate Male. My name is Clay Boykin. I support this podcast through my coaching practice. I help people visualize and harmonize, find direction and meaning, or simply get unstuck. Contact me at clayboykin.com for a free consultation. Now here's the latest episode of In Search of the New Compassionate Male.
Hello world, it's me, Dennis, and we are in search of the new compassionate male. I'm the co-host of this podcast today, and I'm here with the founder, Clay Boykin. Hey, Clay.
Hi, Dennis. I am so pleased to have our friend Julien Oomen back. Can you believe it was 30 episodes ago, and it was January 2021. How time passes, and I am so glad to see you back, Julien. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Wonderful to be back with you guys.
Well, so give us an update on your life and times and perspective, the growth of you and your soul, because that's one thing that so inspired me about getting a chance to meet you, was that you are a soul in process. You are working in yourself in order to grow your healing, your wholeness, your compassion. And so I want to know how this last year has impacted you and that you have experienced it.
I think a lot has to do with the body. I've been connecting a lot with the body. So for example, my day today, if I start just with today, this morning, it's after saying goodbye to my daughter, going to school, I biked off to a place where I went into the water. So outside, it's now up to 8 degrees, the water, I think, Celsius, I mean. But I've been swimming.
Where is this for our audience, Julien?
In Amsterdam. So it's in Amsterdam, sometimes in the canals, sometimes outdoorsy somewhere, just walking through the mud and then getting to the water and going in. And I've been doing that the whole winter. So we started in September, but then the whole winter through, like it went down to 4 degrees, 3 degrees Celsius at a certain moment. And I've been doing that a couple of times a week. It gets pretty cold, of course, and it's been so wonderful for the body, for the mind. And just before coming here into the session, I was at a neighbor and we were discussing free diving, which is a next thing that I want to do, to learn how to be with the breath. I have some fear there, some fear of being without breath so long, and I want to see if I can come past that. But just this, the cold that I was talking about, to be with the cold, to become intimate with the cold and just embrace it, that has been a big part of my journey in the past couple of months. I've been enjoying it so much. It's so beneficial. There's blood flow to corners of the brain where it usually doesn't go. And I still, like right now sitting here, it's evening here, right? It's like it's 10 o'clock now, and I was swimming at 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning. I don't feel the cold anymore, but I still feel this rush, this gentle rush through my body of just having really woken up, So there's been a lot of that, a lot of water, a lot of cold.
How has that impacted your creativity and your and your process? What are you learning about yourself? And I apologize, I cut you off.
You asked exactly the question I was going to ask. So,
well, and in one way specifically, when I go to the water in the morning and it's cold and I'm on my bike and there's a cold wind rushing past me, and then you get to the water, and in that cold wind you start to undress, and mind you, this is without a wetsuit, etc. It's just with bathing suits on, and so you're in the cold wind, and then you still have to go into the water, which is even much colder. And you get used to that. So first that's a bit difficult, but you get used to that and you just go into the water. And then comes my favorite moment a bit later on, after some time in the water, either just breathing or going for a swim. When you get out of the water, that's the moment where you get back onto the grass, and the grass can feel really like painful and cold and can really bite your feet. But the wind suddenly is like lukewarm, sometimes even warm on the skin. That same wind that was cold before because you come out of the
The
water.
differential.
And so you reconnect with your surroundings. First, you are with your winter coat, with your scarf and everything on your back, like cold, cold. And now you're standing there with your dripping, like with your wet body in that wind, and it's like this pleasant, lukewarm wind. So it's such a mind hack. It's such a reset, and that helps a lot with, yeah, as you may imagine, in all other processes of yeah, whenever you're stuck in thinking patterns or conditionings or whatever, it's just this beautiful reset. Yeah, I love it. That's my favorite moment. Yeah.
Wow.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Clay.
yeah. That I'm sure has had an impact on your writing, on your music, and you've been doing quite a bit of work this past year, haven't you?
As for music, I have I have something special coming up this year. I have a collaboration this year with my mother, um, and I'm about to release later this year an album with songs in the French language only. My mother's French, my father is Dutch, and even though I was not raised in the French language because we lived in Indonesia when I was a kid, I did grow up in the end to learn the French language. Um, but I wouldn't that easily write poetry or lyrics for songs in French just like that. But I wanted to sing in the French language. There's a lot of French or French language artists that I love, that have been in my life always. There's also new ones like Stromae, who I am a big fan of, Belgian artist. Um, and I wanted to sing more in the French language. So I asked my mother, what kind of lyrics or words or poems do you have lying around? Because I know that she's always been writing. So she came first with lyrics and poems from when she was 18, 19, 20 years old. I read them. I looked into these themes that she was writing about. There was a poem or a song about her father, about an ex, about solitude, about the fool in the village that she was living in, about many different topics. And before I put them to song, I asked her to revisit the lyrics, to revisit these themes, and write a second part to those lyrics. So then I kept the first part, so we kept it there, but she wrote a second part 55 years later with a new perspective on those themes. So how did she relate to the theme of solitude then and now? The relationship with her father, how has it evolved in 55 years? So the album is like the time span is like more than half a century, and it's intergenerational in the sense that there are like 6 generations that I sing about. There's her father, my grandfather, but also a song about his grandfather, my children. So it's and with my mother. So I also still hope, because I've the process of the songs has already been. I've written all the songs. I've recorded most of them already. But what I would still like to do is to also further connect with her by, for example, doing what we are doing now, to maybe record a podcast with her where we, yeah, go a bit more into the stories and the meanings, like the meaning behind these different songs. I would love that also to reconnect with her, because we don't see that much of each other, and I would like to hear more from her, yeah, about it. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. That would be so wonderful. Um, it, 55 years and 6 generations. Is there? I mean, there's so much, but is there one overarching theme, or is there one thing that really stands out in all of that work?
it's hard for me to answer that question without having my grandfather right in front of me. So all my attention immediately goes to her. So the father of my mother, my French grandfather, because he is so dear to me. And there is two songs about him on the album. So it's not an overarching theme, but when you ask that question, all my attention just like a blood flow goes to him. And yeah, one song is the song where it's about my mother's relationship to him back then and later on. And there's a song that I wrote together with my mother about his youth. Uh, and I was just in time to sing it to him right before he died. So on his deathbed, what happened a couple of years ago, like most old people at a certain moment, they fall, they break something. And then a bit later on, he also had a bleeding and then it went a bit faster. And I had connected with my mother because I wanted to have a song, to write a song about his youth in coastal France, where he would spend his summers with his grandfather. Because by that time he was basically an orphan, in the sense that his father, my great grandfather, had died because of injury of the First World War. Which he had survived, but because he was deaf, he didn't see a car coming and he got run over by a car. And his mother was not really in his life. She was alive, but she wasn't there. So he spent the year in a boarding school, and then in the summer he would be with his grandfather. So my great something grandfather. And that man was like such a big presence in his life. It was like his mother, his father, his everything. And he was afraid of him and he adored him. It was both things. Like that man could like move his world, just with raising one finger. But he was an amazing person that had a beautiful and big influence on him. And in that song, I sing about the moments where my grandfather, who was always running around barefoot there, he would climb the trees and go as far on the branches until the moments where he would feel the combination of fear and joy, ecstasy. And that was when he was at his most happiest. And I was just in time to sing him that song on his deathbed. And the song is called Enfant Sauvage, the wild child. And he heard it. And I sang it again, and I told him, I love you, after the song. And then he just had enough. He had like this speech impediment because the one whole side was gone. But he had enough to say, moi aussi, like me too, moi aussi.
What a wonderful way. I've talked with a number of hospice angels who sing with the dying and have that part of the transition of music and the relationship of music to the transition from life to afterlife is such a holy opportunity to be able to be there at that time.
Yeah. Music is a great thing also for those who are left behind.
Exactly,
a while ago,
and the healing.
Yeah, like a couple of months ago, my neighbor died, and an old woman that lives next door, and we weren't even that close. But when I heard that the next morning she would, she was gonna die, I was just touched by these things like happening on the other side of my wall, and she was a really sweet woman. So I had inspiration. I wrote a song, and then her kids asked me to play it at her funeral, and that was not necessarily for her, but for the ones who stayed behind. And it can help a lot with the process.
I want to go back to this exploration that you have of your family and the consciousness that exploring the consciousness that your great grandfather could, we can only know what we know by the light we can see by. And so they're both in time and in the consciousness, the race mind consciousness of the world as that time. And then your grandfather, what he had as far, then going to your mother in here. Can you see that evolution? Are you beginning to see some through lines that are there that you're exploring?
Yeah, I think that's a generational process that will be visible, discernible for a lot of people. It's the emotionally opening up.
Yes.
That's like my yeah. It's that, my grandfather is this amazing person that I adore, that I love. Like at the end of his life, it was almost like falling in love with him. I just had such a tenderness for him, and we would sit like knee by knee in the kitchen, and he would give me, a speech and hand me over like this medal from the Second World War, but in not necessarily about the war, but just that in this speech, like explaining how at a certain age you just become so receptive to what kindness is. And this he was saying to me, like he was appreciating my kindness and my attention so much. So he was really opening up, and this was something that my mother did not necessarily always receive from him, that openness. So in that song, which is about her relationship with him, in the first part of the song, it's actually about her being a little bit, sometimes a little bit afraid or uncomfortable, not knowing what to do around him. And mind you, this man, my grandfather, was in the Second World War, and he like barely survived it in like all impossible ways. He should have died like so many times, in so many instances. He was so like lucky, angel on his shoulder. And so of course it does mess with you. I mean, everything you've been through as a man at such a young age, as he was. So of course there were things that he could convey, and other things that were just like, he was just also like surviving and trying to make a living after the war, like to find a job. And he was absent a lot of the times, looking for a job, and just making his way through life. And then and I think that, for example, my mother was of the generation that still has not really learned from her parents, both her father and mother, how to be emotionally open and how to really connect. So she is like the generation that started to really have that desire and to strive for that. That definitely started in that generation of my mother, and also often managing, but not necessarily that much with us as children. Not that much, as I'm striving for in my parenthood. It's that.
And that's where the passing it along, the steps, as each one can pass along farther. Clay,
I'm just struck because as you're talking about her in her early life in the opening, when you started out the conversation, this incredibly intimate connection to write music with your mother. It almost leaves me speechless. I think back about my relationship with my mother, and to have had that. There was a lot of love in our family. She's Italian Sicilian, and a lot of love in our family. But to take it into that step to intermingle that time is just wonderful. I can relate to you and your grandfather in the sense that my dad was young and he was in World War II, and he served across France and on. And so that's very touching to me as well.
Yeah. And one of my favorite, I was born in Mexico, and I spoke Spanish before, and my family's French, but that's because there were many French that went entrepreneurs in the late 1800s to Mexico
Mm.
to rebuild. But we have one of our we have one of our American artists. I don't know if you're familiar with her. Her name is Linda Ronstadt, but
Yeah,
did an album called Canciones de mis Padres,
hmm,
Songs of My
songs of my
Fathers,
parents. Yeah,
and it sounds like that you're having some image of this in this album.
yeah.
I'm very excited to be able to hear about it. And so, what are you learning about yourself during this process? Talk about some of the things that you're learning,
Yeah.
because you're getting a chance to do what your mother couldn't do, which was really to open up, to have this emotional space for your daughter to to model. You're modeling for
Hmm.
her how she
Hmm.
can be,
Yeah,
and this is passing along.
yeah. Well, yeah. When I hear hear your words, I realize that that like, two things. That one is that I've been super lucky and fortunate with my parents, and that um, they haven't just done their best, but they have in a lot of times actually been able to open up emotionally. They have been, and especially my father in the past few years, we made some changes in our relationship and softening up. And I hope to also make some steps still with my mother, because I realized that it sounds like we're already right there, collaborating in an intimate process. But the reason that I still want to do the podcast with her is that for me, it actually still feels a little bit still like two separate tracks that we're on. She wrote the lyrics, then and now, and then I went on with my yeah, artistic part. I made the songs, and there are moments when I check in with her about directions I'm taking artistically, or things in the lyrics that I want to change or take out or add. Um, so there's that, and that's very dear and beautiful to me. But I still um, want to, for example, perhaps record that podcast with her,
Hmm.
because like making songs, making art, that can also be something that's just like really me, like making songs, making art, that's, I also want to be free to do my own thing. And in a podcast, like I'm sitting here with you now in conversation, that I still want to do that with her, to really revisit these lyrics, memories, stories, anything that she would still want to share. And the second thing I wanted to say when I listened to your words is that as a parent, I'm messing it up in my own unique way, like, so, and even when I so there is this development from generation to generation. There are certain things, and a lot of them are for the better, definitely. But I'm also just messing it up, in my own
Of
modern
course.
way. So
we're all tromping through through the fields. This
yeah.
this this emotional journey. Will you be having this conversation on this podcast with her in French, English, or Dutch, or what?
Yeah, that question. Ah, I've been thinking about that a lot. So first, I thought it would be in Dutch, because that's actually the language that she and I are most familiar with
Hmm.
between ourselves, between us, and also because the French songs, for those who understand French, they can follow the lyrics, right?
Yes,
And get the meaning and the feel of the song, which you could even feel if you don't understand the language. That's what music
of
does.
course.
So for me, then the podcast would be maybe a rough guide to these French songs for the Dutchies, for example, to do it in Dutch. But then, of course, you want to also have those background stories available to the French speakers or other speakers. So then I was thinking that, yeah, maybe we should actually do it in English, because that in a way that would also be funny, because my mother did not, she was not the one to teach me her mother tongue, you know, like French, because at that time we were living in Indonesia. And so I was already speaking Indonesian, a little bit of English, a little bit of Dutch. And she thought that it would all just be too much. And she had already lived outside of France in like 5, 6, 7 countries. So she was not that attached to that anymore. So to end up just going for like some neutral sort of language, you know, in English, to tell these stories of this French album with us usually normally speaking Dutch, in a weird way, it would make sense. It would have some neutral, and it would be super accessible. Yeah.
Well, to whatever degree we can support you in this.
We would love to. I would love to be able to be part of this. And are there things that you can express and ways of expressing?
Most definitely. Yes. Languages are a big part of my life.
Yes.
So I obviously speak French, and I speak Spanish as good as I speak French, maybe even better, because I speak it more often. And I'm currently learning Arabic for the fun of it, to learn something new and open up the mind. And now that I'm learning Arabic, again, you know, there's this discovery of how people think in a certain language,
Yes.
or how they wrap the language around certain concepts, which then influences or programs the mind, you know, and how we see each other, etc. And so, just to give a little example, because I'm excited about that, in Arabic, when you ask someone, how are you doing, you could either say kifek, which is kif, like how you, very simple. Or in Syria, for example, they will say shlonak, and shlonak is shu lo nak, which is what is your color. So you ask each other, what's your color, which is beautiful. And then I told this to my Syrian colleague, guy I give trainings with. He's from Syria, he's from there, he uses that word all the time. So I told him, wow, that's amazing. You say shlonak, what's your color? And see, that's so cool. And he was like, oh, yeah, that's right. You know, he wasn't even aware of it. You know, like, so there's how language is being shaped, and there's also the way we use it, and the way we either are or are not aware of what we're actually saying. You know, language is just, it's so fascinating.
I've been really doing a lot of thinking lately, and a lot of meditating about the difference between who I truly am and who I think I am, which the two separate pieces of that. And so that who I think I am is my ego, my personality, this I have. But what's beneath that? What is and they've been doing a lot of studies in using psychedelics in the United States, and studies to help people, especially people who are going through the process of dying, to be able to separate that to give them peace, that this who I think I am is not the real me. There's something deeper than that abides in that. And then when I hear your music, I feel that so deeply. I feel that deep sense of you going into the who you are, rather than merely the personality of Julien that is there. That's the strength of and the movement of your work.
Thank you for that. And last week I was in a session of some sorts, and I had a moment where I realized that, like most people, I'm a little bit addicted to like my phone, right, and social media and stuff like that. I mean, I check it a lot of the time, and I know the feeling that I get from that. And in that session last week, I realized that even more than I am addicted to my phone and social media, I am addicted to my personality. like the way I check in and touch base all the time with my personality, you know, and find like a direction or maybe some sort of seeming safety, you know, which is actually not really safety, but just, you know, this personality that I keep going back to, or even nurturing or making important, etc. And it was interesting to feel that, not to put personality necessarily in such a negative, you know, view, but still, it was interesting to feel that same like nagging, you know, addiction feeling with that personality, you know.
Exactly, as to where that is, and to be able to sever how I I want to ask you something, because I haven't gotten the chance to interview President Obama yet, but he had the same experience you did of having his formative years in Indonesia.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk a little bit about the Indonesian experience, and how that how your early years and this predominantly Muslim country, and this, you know, many islands, many just a really interesting culture that is so beyond what we normally experience.
Mm. Well, my most wonderful memory from childhood was the pouring rains. So the rain would just come pouring down, these tropical rainstorms, and so the water would come up. You know, houses would be a bit higher because otherwise the water would just flood into the living room. So I would be outside playing with boats, etc. That's a very vivid memory. And growing up there, yeah, there was animals and fruits and, you know, everything all over the place. And so I have a lot of fond memories. My sister was a little bit older than I was, so when we moved back to Holland, for her that was traumatic. Like she took years to get over that, to get over leaving Indonesia. It was easier on me. Well, seemingly anyway. Like I went outside, played football, and seemed to be okay. And I think I was. So for me, it was till I was 7 years old that I lived there. And so what I remember was, yeah, just the lushness. It's just lush. And it's funny that you mention Obama, because there's a link between Obama and my mother, who has been quite a part of this session now, up until now.
Yes.
Because what happened is that there's quite a direct link between them. When my parents went to Indonesia with us, it was because of my father's work. And my mother had just given birth to me. And Indonesia, when they got there, it was the first country, after having lived in like 6 countries in 12 years. It was the first country where my mother could not really take root. She couldn't really get used to it. Maybe she had a bit of a first like culture clash thing, but mainly also she was still getting to terms with having 2 children and a second young baby,
Right.
etc. So all those things, so classic stuff. And then she got connected, here we go, to Anne Sotoro. And Anne Sotoro is the mother of Barack Obama. Anne Sotoro first was married to the father of Barack Obama, obviously, from Kenya. And when they separated, Anne later remarried to Mr. Sotoro in Indonesia. So then her name was Anne Sotoro. And she actually was kind of a mentor to my mother, connecting her to her first job in Indonesia, which was a job she loved.
How wonderful! Did you, in this process of creating, where are you in the generation from the original page to the release of the album? Where are you in that arc of creating this to where you will be?
For this new album with the French songs, I'm on I think like 70% of recording.
Mm-hmm.
So I have all the songs ready. It's like 11 songs, and my father-in-law he knew about this project, and then he also suggested a song. He's a conductor, quite a famous cello player actually, in an orchestra he was, and he composed a song with French lyrics, existing French lyrics. I forgot the name of the poet, but so there may be an extra song, but he wants to get on the album. No, but I would be happy to have his song there. To be honest, would be lovely. So yeah, I think I'm on 70% of that, and then like for me, last time we spoke, we also spoke about my work, right? Like the other things I do. So music in a way is like a side thing that I take seriously, as in like connected to my heart, that I'm passionate about it in that way. I mean seriously, and that's when I release something like my last album, I tried to do it high end. It was mixed by a fabulous mixer and mastered by. But all these things, they're costly, of course. It's things you invest in. So I'm also with this new French album. I'm also, as for your question, I'm also still looking like how to go about those things, whether I could get some funding for those parts of the mixing, of the mastering, etc. So I'm almost finished with the recording, and as for the financing and making everything doable again, I'm also in that process still. And then hopefully I would like to release it before the summer. Maybe September is more realistic. I don't know yet.
That's wonderful. I wanted to ask, when we spoke last, both sides of the river was pretty much the centerpiece, our conversations around. And you have two other recent albums that came out in at about that same time. What is it? Is it Anchor and Heart Warriors? Are those two albums? Do I have that right?
Those are actually singles. On Spotify, you release either an album or singles, and those tracks you're mentioning are songs on the album.
Okay.
On both sides of the river. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how do you feel when you look back on an album? And you look back on, I know we look back on our interviews and we look back on the different performances, and you feel differently about them from when you created them, from when you look back on. How are you looking back on both sides of the river? And
I'm laughing because the thing is that, particularly with the source where my music comes from, which is like this, either like personal development or spiritual growth or whatever, you go through certain stages, right?
Of course.
And I'm happy to say that on that album, and also the two EPs that I released before that, in general, I'm still very happy with what I made. But it's a delicate thing. It's a vulnerable thing, because you will hear yourself sing certain things that you're like, like, ooh, that's a lot of ego, or that's like, and I don't mean like judging myself, but like some things can be sometimes a little bit uncomfortable. Like, whoa, did I really share that with all these people? This song about this or that? Because there's some vulnerable personal things on those releases. And as for both sides of the river, on an artistic level, as for the sound of it, I'm happy with all of it, actually. And I wouldn't say that I constantly would like to listen to it, because at a certain time you've made it and then you just move on to other things. But for example, on that album, Both Sides of the River, the first track and the last track, those two I can always listen to. It's not just that I'm proud of them, I just love them. I made them, but when I listen to them, like I would listen to someone else's music, I'm just really happy listening to it. And that's special. That doesn't happen that often, like it's cool.
The names of those two songs.
So the first one is called Something, and that one is very much about the intimate spiritual relationship with nature, and the magic. It's about magic, actually. It's just the magic you can find walking around in nature, just all around you. And the last track is called In a Little While, and it's about, in a way, it's about death, but yeah, through that, about life.
And Julien, with your connection to World War II and what is going on in Ukraine, and because you're so much closer to it physically than we are, and emotionally, how is the tenor of the country and the tenor of Europe right now as you're sitting there at this time on the 1st of April 2022?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I think that's something that I also want to put out there about this, is that what I'm sometimes a little bit uncomfortable with here now in the media and people around me, that Ukraine being in this horrible situation is bringing up like a lot of compassion and willingness and openness for people to help, to receive them, which is a beautiful thing. But what I'm mindful of and what I'm a little bit uncomfortable with is that there's war everywhere all the time. For 10 years now, children have been dying in Yemen.
And Syria.
There was a war in Syria. There's all these places.
Thank you.
And in the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, we haven't done so great in opening our homes, opening our borders, and being there for those people. Why? The color of their skin, maybe? So two things. Ukrainians have a white complexion like we do. Second thing, it's closer to home for us. It feels like, it's Europe. It's so close. So it's the proximity and its race. And even the refugees from Ukraine that are not white, they also have a harder time getting anywhere than the white Ukrainians. So that really makes me very sad. So of course I want to join into that compassionate movement, or whatever you call it, of being there for them and this solidarity. But I feel very uneasy with it at the same time.
I'm so glad that you said that. That was one of the Clay and I have been talking about that specific issue, that because they're white, because they are Caucasian, the world is opening in their hearts, and the media is paying so much more attention to it than when there was when it was happening in Yemen, when it was happening in Syria, and when it's happening in Africa.
Is happening in Yemen, and is happening in Syria,
as it continues to do.
Yeah, like in our previous talk, we did also speak a little bit about my work, which is I work a lot with newcomers, so people with a refugee background. And because of that, I've also worked in asylum centers for 10 years. Because of that, I'm very much aware about the things people go through, coming here or not even being able to come here. And of course, I have a lot of exposure as for news articles and whatever. So I'm very much connected to the goings on. And of course, I realize that not everybody is, but the Syrian refugee crisis and all the other refugee crises were all over us, so nobody can say that I didn't know about it or something, and now that, or something like that. But now that this is happening in Ukraine, suddenly everybody's on, the first one to shout, solidarity and
exactly on what we're doing. And so it really helps us if we can remember that we are all one race, the human race. and we are all beings on this, and so we can work to remember that. And I constantly have to work through my own conscious and unconscious biases. That's what Clay and I've been doing over this in search of the new compassionate male, really working through where within us are those conscious and unconscious biases, so that we can act more open-heartedly and open-mindedly than we would have just to react.
Yeah, you can manage the unconscious bias that you're aware of. You cannot manage the unconscious bias that you're not aware of.
No,
but you can. I'm also laughing because I have a Syrian colleague. His name is Fares Al-Kadi, and together we give a training on unconscious bias. It's about unconscious bias, diversity, and inclusion. And today, so far, it's been mouth to mouth. It's been going fine. But we also, I mean, the new assignments. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but we're too lazy still to make a website, but at least we want to have a nicely designed PDF or something if people ask a little bit more information, so we were working on that today. So we were really into the language of how to, in a nice, efficient way, convey what unconscious bias is and how to make people excited about it, to learn about it, to become more aware about it.
Oh, if you can help share that with us. Is it in English?
It is, yeah.
I would love to see that, because I want to work on that, because I can't know what I don't know, especially when I'm in denial about that, or I have the, oh, please share that. Please share that with us, Julien.
Sure.
Oh, Clay, isn't this wonderful?
It is. I go back to our first conversation and how taken I was with that, and how much I enjoyed after the podcast, after the episode, doing the editing and weaving your music into it and so forth. And in this hour has been that and more.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Are you going to be doing, like you've done with some of your other songs, doing video with that, and any way that you can help us know how we can support you in this artistic effort? I want to be part of it. I want to be part of spreading the word about this album and the rest as you're doing.
Wonderful. Thank you. And with this new album, because there's so many stories to tell, and it's personal and dear to me. But in all those personal stories, there are little trapdoors to the universal in every song.
Oh yes.
So I would love to put it out there, and maybe maybe the podcast should be in English.
Let us be part of that. We would love to be able to help produce that and to be able to watch that. I know I'm speaking for Clay, but we would love to be able to do that, and also to be able to publicize it in every way we can. We're working on new ways to publicize and to be part of your journey. We're in. Certainly, both of us are in, and want to be part of this happening.
And you know what? Like, when I spoke about that connection with my mother, in a way, maybe sometimes there's only so much that you can get to, like, emotionally together, if it's just the two of you. Like, I also believe in relationship therapy, for example, because if there's a third person present, things are just perceived in a different way, and other things start flowing. So actually, this idea of maybe doing an episode or several, I don't know, in another way that I was thinking of, just the two of us, me and my mother, could be really interesting to have, like, for example, you guys just asking questions.
All right. Well, you have given us so much to begin with, and thank you, Julien. When Clay told me that we were going to be having you on again, I was so excited. It was just thank you for staying up late because I know that it is late where you are, and you'll be back in the ice water tomorrow morning.
Yes, I will.
And to be able to do that, and I'll continue to press here. Clay, any closing thoughts?
Well, we've kind of covered it, but I got to underscore it. Please come back.
I have a closing question.
All yours, Julien.
To you, Clay, because I find your name to be so fascinating, and like we discussed the album Both Sides of the River a little bit this time, and last time also a little bit, and I remember that last time you also connected with that song Father's Arms, you know, about men coming alive in their fatherhood. And I just wonder, like, how much attention have you spent to your name, Clay Boykin? Like, what do you see and hear in your name? Like, what the obvious thing that I see? Like, do you see it?
What do you see in it?
Yeah. Okay. So there's something obvious for me there. Do you happen to know what kintsugi is?
Yes.
I don't.
Oh gosh. Please.
Kintsugi is this Japanese technique where, with preferably gold or something that resembles gold, where you mend broken pieces, for example, of a vase. A vase is broken and you put it together and you basically make it more beautiful because
I've seen that, but I didn't know its name.
Yes, that's kintsugi. And when I read your book, Clay, Circles of Men, I was sometimes looking at your name, and I used the book also, like there's the mandala behind you now. In the end, at the end of the book, I was making a little mandala, etc. And if you look at your mandala, as I'm looking at it right now, you know, it's like all these connections you're making, right? It's like all these, just putting everything together. So for me, the way that you connected to my song Father's Arms, and really also connecting with your own inner boy, right? The small Clay. When I look at your first name, for me, it's like you are the clay between the little boy and his kin.
Thank you for that.
What a gift. Oh, what a gift. Oh, I will. Thank you. You've lit me up as usual. Julien, thank you for this time again and for the times to come. Clay, thank you for inviting me along. And I want to thank everyone for listening, for giving us this opportunity to have another conversation and another trip and exploration within each of us. And we will see you next time in search of the new compassionate male.
Check out the latest episode of In Search of the New Compassionate Male on your favorite podcast station.